Cherokees had long called western Georgia home. The Cherokee Nation continued on their land until 1828. It was then that the rumor of gold being discovered in the North Georgia mountains changed everything. The Cherokees in 1828 were not nomadic savages as some thought. In fact, they had assimilated many European customs, including the wearing of gowns by Cherokee women and other European clothing. They built roads, schools, and churches, had a system of representational government, and were farmers and cattle ranchers. A Cherokee alphabet was even developed, known as the Talking Leaves. Andrew Jackson had long supported a policy of moving Native Americans west of the Mississippi. He first dealt with southeastern tribes after the War of 1812. The federal government ordered Jackson, then acting as the Indian Treaty Commissioner, to make treaties with Native Americans of the region. Through these treaties forced on the tribes, the government gained large tracts of land. Jackson believed that the government had the right to regulate where Native Americans could live. He viewed them as conquered subjects who lived within the borders of the United States. He thought that Native Americans had one of two choices. They could adopt white culture and become citizens of the United States, or they could move into the Western territories. They could not, however, have their own governments within the borders of the United States. After the discovery of gold, whites began to move onto Cherokee land. Georgia and other southern states passed laws that gave them the right to take over Native American lands. When Cherokees and other tribes protested Jackson, he supported the states. To solve the problem, Jackson asked Congress to pass a law that would require Native Americans to either move west or submit to state laws. Many Americans objected to Jackson's proposal. Massachusetts Congressman Edward Everett opposed removing Native Americans against their will to a distant land. There, he said, they would face the perils and hardships of the wilderness. Religious groups such as the Quakers also opposed forced removal of Native Americans. After heated debate, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act in 1830. The act called for the government to negotiate treaties that would require Native Americans to relocate west. Jackson immediately set out to enforce the law. He thought his policy was just and liberal, and would allow Native Americans to keep their way of life. Instead, his policy caused much hardship and forever changed relationships between whites and Native Americans. As whites invaded their homelands, many Native Americans saw no other choice but to sign treaties exchanging their land for land in the West. Under the treaties, Native Americans would be moved to an area that covered what is now Oklahoma and parts of Kansas and Nebraska. This area came to be called Indian Territory. Beginning in the fall of 1831, the Choctaw and other Southeast tribes were removed from their lands and relocated to the Indian Territory. The Cherokees, however, first appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court to protect their land from being seized by Georgia. In 1832, the Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice John Marshall, ruled that only the federal government, not the states, could make laws governing the Cherokees. This ruling meant that the laws in Georgia did not apply to the Cherokee Nation. However, both Georgia and President Jackson ignored the Supreme Court. Jackson said, "John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it." a small group of Cherokees gave up and signed a treaty to move west. The majority of Cherokees opposed the treaty. Jackson refused to negotiate with the Cherokees. In 1838, federal troops commanded by General Winfield Scott rounded up about 16,000 Cherokees and forced them into camps. Soldiers took people from their homes with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Over the fall and winter of 1838 to 1839, these Cherokees set out on a long journey west. Forced to march in the cold, rain, and snow without adequate clothing, many grew weak and ill, and eventually 1/4 of them died. This harsh journey of the Cherokees from their homeland to the Indian Territory became known as the Trail of Tears.